Happy Friday, everybody, and more importantly, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2021. James Hancock here, and back to review Season 3 of Cobra Kai. If you have not seen it yet, I will avoid spoilers in my initial comments, but I will be getting into spoiler territory later in my review. But not to worry, I'll give you fair warning first. But just so you don't have to wait to hear what I thought overall, this season starts off a little slow, but builds to a phenomenal climax, giving me chills on multiple occasions throughout the season, in particular the last few episodes, which perfectly tee up the next season in a way that's going to make fans go berserk. And the good news is that Netflix has already renewed the show for a season 4, which is great. But I do have to say this, the first few episodes of this season were a little weak, at times outright bad, so much so that I worried that the entire season might turn out to be a disaster, but much to my relief and delight, right around episode 5, I suddenly found myself in love with the show all over again, and as I was ripping through the second half of the season, just having an absolute blast, I was genuinely annoyed each time I had to pause to scribble down some notes, and as I was watching the second half of season 3, I breathed this massive sigh of relief, knowing that I was going to be able to offer a rave review for a show that continues to deliver one satisfying season after another. So I'll be getting into more details about what I liked and disliked as I get into spoilers, but let me first pause and sing the show's praises for pulling off what should have been impossible. I am in awe that we've now seen 3 great seasons of TV, decades after the release of the original trilogy of films, or 4 if you include The Next Karate Kid starring Hilary Swank from 1994. I don't include the remake from 2010 in the official continuity. But 99 times out of 100, a show like this would be a shameless cash grab, a pure gimmick wallowing in nostalgia that quickly wears out its welcome with diminishing returns, and yet Cobra Kai continues to work. And not only does it work, it continues to mine the past for classic characters and flashbacks while seamlessly weaving them together with all the new cast members with very entertaining results. Of all the legacy franchises out there that have been brought back in recent years, I think Cobra Kai has been one of the most successful. What we have in essence is a karate high school soap opera with this endless array of possibilities as characters fall in and out of love or form alliances only to betray one another before inevitably joining forces again. And admittedly, the martial arts can be wildly uneven, depending upon the individual actors and how much assistance they require from their stunt person. But I don't watch this franchise solely for the martial arts. The Karate Kid and Cobra Kai franchise is all about heart. If I want martial arts, I watch MMA. Because what this show offers is a lot like all those beloved 90s high school dramedies and melodramas, a lot like 90210, but with the added bonus of all this great narrative history established by the original movies. And this is not to say that the show is always some perfect home run or that I don't occasionally roll my eyes at a ridiculously sentimental line of dialogue, but the reality is that this show across 3 seasons has consistently made me cheer and laugh over and over again. And that level of joy is not something that I take lightly, because at times light entertainment can feel like a lost art form. But when it comes to this particular show, I think we're in great hands with series creators Josh Heald, John Hurwitz, and Hayden Schlossberg, who I think now can boast and brag about a very consistent track record across all 3 seasons. And what's interesting to me is how this show has evolved, because it seemed like in season 1 they used the character of Johnny to poke fun at a lot of the trends of the last few years, things like politically correct storytelling, or the policing of language, or safe spaces, or trigger warnings, all that nonsense. And some of that can still be found in Johnny's comments, but it seems like now the focus of the show has shifted. Through Daniel, Johnny, Kreese, and their students, what we're seeing now is basically a battle for the soul of the San Fernando Valley, where the main battleground is this little karate dojo in a strip mall. It sounds completely ridiculous, and if we're being honest, the whole premise is absurd, but somehow the writers have struck the perfect tone to make the whole show work. I think the secret sauce is that the show has just enough self-deprecating comedy that the show and the writers and the cast, it never feels like they're taking themselves too seriously. It's just fun to watch, and that's why I'm always pushing people to check out the show. It's also very quotable, like when someone asks Johnny if he's checking into rehab and he replies that he's no quitter. I love that stuff, but I realize that I'm starting to slip into spoiler territory. So last warning, go watch the show, and if you've never seen the original Karate Kid, shame on you, go watch that too. So let's start with my criticisms just to give this video some proper balance. My concern early on this season was that Cobra Kai was turning into just another generic show, totally innocuous, formulaic, and forgettable. Around episode 3, I was thinking to myself that the show is basically failing to make a strong case as to why it should continue to exist, and that perhaps the overall concept had just run out of steam, because the season initially really takes its sweet time. It shows all the characters picking up the pieces after the high school brawl at the end of season 2. Miguel's going through surgery and rehabbing his legs. Robbie ends up in juvie. Sam's wrestling with her fear and anxieties. Cobra Kai is continuing to bully and harass anyone that crosses their path. And some of these scenes honestly made this feel like a show for little kids. kids. Because apart from the occasional one-liner by Johnny and a fun little Tango and Cash style team-up by Daniel and Johnny in a garage, I have to admit I was really struggling to get into it. A big problem in the first half of the season is lackluster action, both inside and outside of Cobra Kai. A lot of these actors are just unathletic and uncoordinated and can be pretty unconvincing to anyone who's had even the smallest exposure to martial arts. I took karate well over 20 years ago back in college, but I do have a little knowledge about it, and I recently whipped out some of my moves in the closing credits of the short film I produced, Hobo with the High Kick, which I'll link in the video notes below. But what I struggled with most in the first half of the season was this major plot point where the car manufacturer Toyota in Japan refuses to do any more business with Daniel LaRusso due to his association with this high school brawl. And this threatens LaRusso's entire livelihood. And I get that the writers wanted to send LaRusso to Japan this season and bring in some flashbacks from The Karate Kid Part 2, but the entire premise of this show starts to break anytime the story leaves the San Fernando Valley. This is a self-contained story in fictional setting, and too much detail from the outside world completely breaks the spell. And it's just ridiculous that a manufacturer in Japan would even be aware of this high school scuffle, which landed Miguel in the hospital. I feel like the focus of this show should always be about who runs the best dojo in the valley and who's going to win the next All-Valley tournament. Basically, epic melodrama, but with the lowest stakes imaginable as far as the outside world is concerned. But I got my first glimmer of hope at the end of episode 4 when two things happened. First, Johnny becomes Miguel's sensei again, and then LaRusso bumps into his old rival Chosen, played by Fuji Yakamoto in Karate Kid Part 2. I saw parts 1 and 2 in the theater back in the day, but I have to admit that Part 1 is the far superior movie. In any event, I first saw Fuji Yakamoto on the screen when he was doing his Howard Cosell impersonation in Better Off Dead. But now in 2020, he's returned to help Daniel get back on his feet with some additional training in Miyagi-Do, which Chosen still teaches in Okinawa. And it was really cool hearing someone called Daniel-san again, but Chosen teaches him some new moves involving pressure points, a technique that pays dividends at the end of the season. And while there are times where I worry that this show is going to set back people's understanding of martial arts by several decades, I think everyone gets that this is all in good fun. But it's around this episode where the show really starts to find its footing again and things start happening at a rapid clip. Tori and Sam, they resume their rivalry in earnest, which is always tons of fun to watch in action. Hawk breaks Dimitri's elbow, which dramatically ups the stakes between the two schools. Miguel gets the use of his legs back when Johnny takes him to a Dee Snider concert. And then we get the big moment that we've all been waiting for. Johnny sees the friend request on Facebook from Allie, which brings the great Elizabeth Shue back into the fold. And from here on out, everything is just smooth sailing until the season's conclusion. I also should admit that I had a serious childhood crush on Elizabeth Shue back in the 1980s, and it's been great in recent years seeing her continue to deliver great performances in shows like The Boys. One of my favorite twists in the second half of the season is Kreese's decision to recruit natural athletes to Cobra Kai, which reintroduces the bully Kyler into the mix and upsets the pecking order that's been established within Cobra Kai's ranks, which creates this interesting game of musical chairs between the different schools, including Johnny's best idea ever, Eagle Fang Karate. The name makes absolutely no sense, but as Johnny so eloquently puts it, they don't get shit on, they do the shitting. But this three-way rivalry between all the dojos gives us the best kind of tension, especially when the show starts cross-cutting between their various philosophies, as well as an incredible split-screen title card with all three teachers side by side. Sadly, there's no getting around the fact that Martin Kove is well into his 70s now and struggles with the physical side of his role, but I do think this season did an excellent job of fleshing out his character. While I struggle to take the Vietnam flashback sequences seriously at all, let's just say they weren't on the level of something like The Deer Hunter or Platoon. That said, I did enjoy seeing the gladiatorial style combat scenes over this pit of snakes, which inspires so much of Kreese's future dojo, including the lines used by his former teacher, who Kreese has to fight to the death. But I'm starting to realize two things. First of all, I might have liked this season even more than I realized, in that there's so much that I want to talk about. But secondly, this video is going to be an hour long if I don't get down to it. So from now on, I'm just going to give shout outs to scenes and moments that I particularly enjoyed. So as always, I loved Courtney Hengler as Amanda LaRusso. She absolutely made me howl when she first meets Allie and she's describing Daniel and Johnny's ongoing feud and their battle for the soul of the valley. And Allie's reaction to the fact that both Daniel and Johnny have their own dojos gave me one of the best laughs of the entire season. Peyton List continues to nail the character of Tori, and I think she's easily the coolest person at Cobra Kai. She just leans into the whole Cobra Kai philosophy of dividing the world into the strong and the weak, and she has absolutely zero remorse over how Cobra Kai behaves. And something tells me that she and Robbie are going to be getting it on in Season 4 now that he's joined their ranks. Annalisa Cochran was great as Yasmin. I have to admit that she's very easy on the eyes, and I thought she had by far the best joke of the entire season. While she might have been a little underutilized in terms of screen time, she has this hysterical moment where she writes, "I love your big dick," inside of a drawing made by someone else on Dimitri's cast. It was absolutely fabulous. And Hawk had a great arc this season. We see him go completely berserk on someone who used to bully him, even spitting on him after he's down. But I had the world's biggest smile on my face when he turns his back on Cobra Kai and stands back to back with Dimitri, the two of them defending each other in the middle of this battle royale. Their reconciliation has been absolutely fantastic. Also, anytime someone switches teams, it opens up all these new matchmaking possibilities between the various schools and keeps the battles fresh. But the secret weapon of the season was bringing back Elizabeth Shue, which obviously ties everything together, takes everything back to the first movie, which is the spine or the DNA of this entire franchise. The way Daniel and Johnny both pursue her in the first movie, that's the heart of the first film. And resurrecting this three-way romantic tension was an excellent creative choice. It just takes everything back to basics. We get another fantastic date sequence at Golf and Stuff, where Johnny and Allie give us this great mirror image of the date that Allie and Daniel had in the first movie. And while the youngins out there might be more interested in the love triangle between Miguel, Sam, and Robbie, for me it's all about Allie, especially when we see how Johnny's still tormented by these memories of Allie saying, "You're the best," to Daniel, after Daniel kicked Johnny in the face at the All Valley tournament. And I think the best dramatic scene all season has to be when Allie thanks Johnny for allowing her to feel like a kid again, all while we hear the classic Journey tune, "Open Arms," on the soundtrack. But most importantly, Allie makes Daniel and Johnny realize just how much they have in common, which opens the door to Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang finally truly joining forces after Cobra Kai's assault on LaRusso's home. And speaking of that battle, we finally got some great action. Clearly the show brought in a fresh stunt coordinator for some better choreography this scene, at least compared to the first half of the season, because I think there's really no excuse these days for dated portrayals of martial arts in film and television. A lot has changed in the world of martial arts since the 1980s, especially in recent years, where karate experts like Lyoto Machida and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson have successfully competed at the championship level in the UFC, showing how karate can be adapted and integrated into mixed martial arts. And I know I'm not the only one out there who wants to see high-level martial arts incorporated into the show, but this battle with wailing electric guitars was the perfect holiday battle to wrap up 2020. Who knows, that might be why Netflix decided to move up the release of this show by a week. But the battle at Cobra Kai was a little bit different in that it was more about drama. As I mentioned before, Martin Kove, he is absolutely too old for this shit, which limits the options and camera angles as Johnny has this battle with Kreese's very obvious stuntman. But we almost got into like Return of the Jedi territory with Kreese acting like Emperor Palpatine, pitting father and son against one another. We had 3 generations of Cobra Kai just duking it out. And William Zabka, he's still the coolest character on the show. He definitely screams the best kias when he attacks. And plus, he still looks totally badass anytime he puts on a red jacket with a black headband. That's going to be his look until the end of time. Plus, he's just funny as hell. I absolutely screamed with laughter during that scene where he knocks a kid's books out of his hands and tells him, "Sorry, kid, old habit." I think of all the great 80s high school villains, he's got to be the best. At any rate, this is all going to get settled the old-fashioned way the next season at the next All Valley tournament. The season ends on this massive high note with Daniel and Johnny joining forces. For some reason, they went with a cover of the classic Phil Collins tune, "In the Air Tonight." I guess the original was just too expensive, but the scene still managed to give me some major chills. And considering where the season started versus where it ended, I think this has got to be one of the best turnarounds or comebacks for a season of television that I've ever seen. As far as predictions for season 4 goes, I'm thinking it's time for 2-time Oscar-winning Hilary Swank to make her return. She was Mr. Miyagi's final student in the film The Next Karate Kid, and as we saw in the movie The Hunt, she's still got a few moves. And I have no idea if season 4 is going to be the last, but I'm thinking we definitely need one more battle between Daniel and Johnny. Even if it's just teased at the end, like Rocky and Apollo's final battle at the end of Rocky 3 as the film cuts to closing credits. But I continue to be blown away by just how much juice they've managed to squeeze out of this franchise, and I'm very fired up to go back through season 3 and revisit some highlights as soon as I'm done editing this review. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. I think I've talked enough at this point. I'm a little bit sick, so I apologize if I sound a little off in this video. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, hitting that notification bell, all that good stuff. And if you want to talk more about Karate Kid or Cobra Kai or martial arts, whatever, hunt me down on Twitter at Colbrax. But I hope everyone has an amazing weekend. Hope everyone has an amazing new year. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.